Hi there, it's Bill with the Doomer Bloomer podcast. Now, if you're a listener to the show, you know that I've been doing this for a long time. But now there's an easier way to make a podcast. If you haven't heard about Anchor, let me explain. It's free. There's creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your computer or phone. The Anchor app will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple, Google, Stitcher, and many more. And you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. It's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Cheers. We're live. Welcome back to the Doomer Bloomer podcast, season 2 with Will Summer. Today on the podcast, I have a friend of mine. He would call himself a Sparky by trade, a Renaissance man by night. His name is Mike McWilliams. And today he's here to talk about the end of the isms. All right, Mike.
Nice to be here.
All right. So, yeah, how do you feel about the end of an era?
I don't know, it's some people are interested in economics, politics, geography, history, that kind of thing, and you kind of get a feeling that as we progressed since we started farming, the rate of change has been slow, but there's been some times where it's really sped up, and especially the last 2,000 years, it's really sped up quite a bit. And we like to think, from my point of view, that most people that the world doesn't change that fast in your day-to-day life, especially hasn't changed socially that much in the last 70 years. Governments are largely the same, economics largely the same. But over the last 200, we've really been struggling and trying to figure out how to get industrialization to work. How do you go from an agrarian society to an industrial one? And how do you organize the taxation, laws, courts, everything, right? Because that was a huge change, even if you just look at the British industrialization, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But everyone talks about industrialization as if that was the first time years ago, it took steam engines to really change. But if you look at it, you just look at the math and the numbers and how things started changing. It really started changing about 500 years ago in the 1500s, right when we started doing long-haul ocean-going trade.
It became a global society.
We started going down that road, yes, and we started consuming more. And it started off almost like everything else does with the upper echelons. And then it moved down, and I got a really nice, quick example of this in something as simple as the nutmeg spice trade. If you look at nutmeg in Europe where it was sold, you never saw it as a commoner. It was restricted to the nobility, the kings, and the papacy, because it was worth more by weight than gold. You just never saw it. And it was like that for over 2,000 years. But then lo and behold, a couple enterprising Spaniards and Portuguese figured out how you can sail around the world a little bit more efficiently. And they start bringing the stuff in. And at first, it makes it a little bit cheaper for the upper crust, but eventually they're bringing it in such numbers in bulk that now your merchant class can afford it. And as they start making more money off of it and wanting to service this greater demand, well, now you have to get more efficient on the transport. Now you have to get more efficient on the production side of things. And the higher you get the production going and the better you get the transport going, the cheaper it becomes, the wider availability it is price-wise for everyone, which also increases the demand until you eventually saturate the whole market to where you can buy the crap in Walmart now, right?
Yeah, now, it's a commodity now.
Yeah, it's it was a commodity before, but it's like any other commodity. Now, that can be analogous for almost anything. Like clothing used to be expensive, food in general, building supplies, you name it. And we have done that with almost everything. Now, once you've saturated a market, which eventually you will, there's only one way to grow it if you've already got pretty much everyone buying it, and that is to increase the population itself. Now, you don't consciously do this, but if you look at the last 500 years, we went from roughly 1 billion people to now we're edging up near to 8, right? Now, everyone talks about the scarcity of resources and how this is going to lead to conflicts, which it has, but no one ever stops to ask the question, what happens when demand starts going away, right? So
Okay.
have you looked much into population demographics at all?
Not in quite some time, no.
No. You are aware that the world over, especially in the industrialized world, we're aging rapidly, right?
Yeah, we've talked about this in the past. You were talking about the concept of stagflation in Japan.
Yeah. And Japan's a country that actually pulled it off exceedingly well. They went into their demographic crisis as the second richest country on the planet at the time. Very well ordered, well governed, very wealthy society. So if you're going to go into that kind of crisis, that's how you want to go into it, right? But the problem is if you look at the population demographics for almost every single industrialized country, not just Western countries, but China, Russia. Russia's terrible when it comes to demographics, and many others. They're all in the same boat. Like everyone just kind of forgot to have kids starting around 1970.
It wasn't seen as a necessary venture, I guess.
Well, if you stop and think about it, 500 years ago, even 200 years ago, you're on the farm, you're a poor farmer, right? Now, yeah, you got to feed them and whatnot, but for every child you have, that's free labor. So having 6, 8 kids, that's a blessing. That's, that's free labor. It makes life easier, right? You move into a city, start working in a factory, and it is not like you'll love them, you care for them, they're, our future, quote unquote, but economically, they're really expensive poodles. And you're only going to have so many of them, right? So,
Yeah.
Yeah. So within the next 20 years, nearly every industrialized society is going into this demographic crunch where you start getting top heavy, right? Would you mind me kind of going into like economically how the 3 big age groups kind of fit in, because it will make a lot more sense.
Yeah, man. It's your funeral.
All right, your podcast. Make sure I don't ramble too much. I'm bad for that. So you start, first we start off as like children. So let's say, 0 to 18, right? And you just consume both private, your parents' money, government money, everything. You're just consume, and the one saving grace about you from a societal standpoint is eventually you're going to grow up and you're going to go out there, start working, producing, and consuming as well, right? So then you age into a young worker. That's roughly, that's like 20 to 40, right? Now you're just started your career. You probably got some student debt, and you're not making that much money, but your expenses are at the highest they're ever going to be. For the first time, you're buying cars, houses, pot, kids, all that sort of stuff, right? But you don't have the money. So this is a debt-driven system. So you go and you simply just borrow money. Well, where does that money come from? That goes in the next age group, which is your 40-year-olds to your 65-year-olds, your mature workers. By the time you get to that point, the house is largely paid off. The cars are largely paid off. Maybe you still got one, but it's not that big of a deal for a payment in there. Kids are out of the house, and you're starting to save for retirement. And this is what we've really seen with the baby boomers over the last 20 odd years, is as they've been stocking money away for retirement, they put it in the bonds, the stock market, banks, and this has made credit very cheap because the bank just doesn't hold on to that money, obviously. They take and they lend it out to somebody else. Well, the last 20 years is the banks and other financial institutions, they have all this money, they're trying to get a return on it, but there's only so many good places to invest. So the last 20 years, every bad, shitty idea has been able to get financing worldwide. Like, this is Brazil. Like, without the baby boomers, you just don't have fucking Brazil. If you look at Brazil, it doesn't make sense. Like, they got oil, well, so does everybody else. Like, come on. You also have China, which honestly, like, you want to go invest in China, that's fine. Yes, it was a growing economy. Yes, cheap labor force, but a lot of these companies, they've now found out that once you put money in China, that money never coming out of China. They don't like the money leaving the system. So that's by itself cooled off investment in China over the last, especially 3 years with, what's his name? Zhao or whatever his name is. Winnie the Pooh there. Him really clamping down on that. So, sorry?
So you're talking about the current leader of China?
Yeah, what's his name? I have a little brain fart there.
I honestly don't know who that is, but
I'll know.
I can put a link in the description for people who don't know who that is.
Yeah, I freaking know talking about him just today there. But Winnie the Pooh, everyone should get that reference. So yeah, basically over the next, like, the thing is, like, for especially Western Europe, Canada, 2023 and 2022 for some of them was like the last year that most countries had to solve this problem. And we're starting to see some countries starting to address it with regards to retirement policies, the tax policies, and everything else. In around 2018, some seem to be starting to wake up to it. But then Corona comes in, and that's kind of kiboshed a lot of these countries' plans, because it's robbed everyone of the time to get ready for this massive Japanese-style retirement, binge. Because if you look at Japan, Japan economically has not progressed in over 30 years. And that's the future for the lucky, well-off countries going into the future here.
Okay, so what you're essentially saying is there won't be the quote unquote middle class, I guess, in a sense.
Well, like, you have a middle class in Japan, but even Japan, they still work largely off integrating into the larger international system. But even then, they played it very smartly. They used to be one of the world's largest exporting countries. They don't export anymore. They set up a factory in whatever country they're selling, hire their workers there, and then ship the profits back to Japan to pay for the retiree population. This is not going to be an option for most other countries. But the main problem is you're just starting to gut demand because you're having fewer young people. And this is not something that there is light at the end of the tunnel. You look at the overwhelming majority of demographic data, especially if you pull up Italy's demographics for now. It's almost like it's like someone with like stilted legs, like really wide. Like, you got a couple, senior citizens, but then it just bulges out in the 54 age range. It peaks out at 54 at around what's this 2.5 million for 55 to 59 years of age, and then after that it starts dropping off a cliff, right down to the point where for your newborn 0 to 4 years old, you got less than half of that. You got 1.4 million. And that's just for the girls' side of things, double it for the boys. But it just, like, once you're having your next generation, that's the end of any kind of production or consumption base. Because now you don't have large scales of cheap young labor like China had back in the 90s. And that's another news flash, is that one-child policy, it really did work. China has run out of young people. The average Chinese person is now older than the average American. So China's on borrowed time if they plan on being an exporting country, because their labor is now more expensive than Mexican labor.
You're talking about an inverted pyramid.
Exactly. Like, usually a healthy, well, not healthy, but your traditional demography looks like India. Lots of kids, slightly fewer youth, slightly fewer young adults, so on and so forth, until everyone's dead. But we've almost got it flipped upside down. And then you have some countries like, say, Russia's demographics. It looks more like a chainsaw blade. It's just jagged all over the place.
Okay.
But yeah, like, there's some countries that might pull out of this not fine, like the United States, between a mixture of, evangelical no birth control and immigrants, their population is more like a pyramid. That's from like a chimney, straight up and down. So they'll have a little bit of pain with their baby boomers, but at the end of the day, they'll be able to pull through this. But even then, most of this is because they're bringing immigrants from Mexico and Latin America. But even Mexico has stopped having kids en masse. So Mexico is going to start aging out over the next 40 years. That means the immigrants in the United States is going to dry up. So the United States, they'll be able to pull the current system off for probably the next 40 years. But after that, even they're going to have to rethink how they're going to economically and politically function.
Okay. What does this mean for the average person?
Well, if you're into investments, again, this would be like what kind of industry you're in, right? So people are always going to be using electricity, and the average electrical consumption per person has been going up. So if you are in, say, the fuel industry or electrical industry, like production side of things, period, that's going to remain somewhat stable. But if you're in, like, I'm not quite sure which one of your listeners this would apply to, but let's say you are a German.
Okay.
And you work at some factory that Germany exports half of everything it makes. It's an export-led country. If your consumers simply stop existing, like slowly over time, this means that your country's economy, basically, within the export-led market, isn't going to work nearly as much. This is very hard, like, to try to figure out career-wise and industry-wise what you're going to do. I would say if your gig is involved in export, move to a country where they don't export, but they consume their own product, like the States. Because the United States, they export next to nothing. And contrary to popular belief, they don't import that much. Like, when it comes to trade with other countries there, what is it? It's like on average now, it's a total of 8% of the American GDP is in trade. Compare that to the German 58%.
Okay.
And 5 of that is between Canada and Mexico. And I actually think Mexico has increased since the new NAFTA 2 deal. So I would say they're probably even higher. I don't know the number, but the total American global trade, import, export, and then this is including China in this number, it makes up only, it changes your year, but 2 to 3% of the American GDP. It's nothing. That's a bad that's a mild recession. Not even. So, with regard, again, it's industry specific. We're gonna have a lot of old people. So if you are in the pharmaceuticals and medical industry, you're gonna be very busy.
Yeah, there are shortages of qualified healthcare staff.
I know my girlfriend there is a RN nurse there, and they can't keep them.
So yeah, so I guess so that's I guess one boom. The other like, cause I tend to think about things in threes, and I personally look at things like you said before, energy, food security, and everyone needs a roof over their head. But honestly, the market is moving toward renting, not owning your own home.
Yes, especially with how cheap credit has been, where the interest rate's very low, but how many people can afford a $750,000 mortgage?
Right, especially in larger centers like Vancouver or Toronto, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I see. So you think there's going to be an end of capitalism in a sense towards what sort of ism?
Well, for one, who knows what the future holds? If it's an end, like, I don't like the word end, though it is catchy, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
But if you look at how free enterprise worked 400 years ago, it was free enterprise, but it worked off a totally different set of rules than we currently have. And that also goes based on, like, I'm a free market guy, I'm pretty libertarian. But at the same time, if you look at how capitalism works, based on it needs to either grow or it dies. You can't, if you're a capitalist system, you can't just stagnate. If you're working with, especially within a fiat credit system that we currently do live in, there's always more debt than there is money in the system. So you're either growing or you're starting to choke, right? Pardon me?
You're talking about an evolution of capitalism.
You need an evolution to the point that I'm not sure you could call it what we call capitalism nowadays. It would almost need a new name. Free market, maybe, but I think it would function differently. How? I don't know. I'm not smart.
Right.
But that goes for all the other isms, because if you look at capitalism, socialism, communism, fascism, and we really hope that this includes fascism, is they all require that young, working, consuming base. And no one's going to have that in a very short period of time. 20 years, no one's going to have that.
Besides India.
Well, even India, that's the funny thing about developing countries. It took 100 years for what we call the developed countries, mainly the Western countries, to age into this old, what do you call it, kleptocracy or whatever, geriocracy, rule of the old, right? It's taken 100 years.
Right.
The developing countries, like Brazil, they tend to, once their birth rates start to drop, they drop off a cliff. Like, even without the one-child policy, China's demographics would have jumped off a cliff. Brazil's has jumped off a cliff. India's is now, like, they've gone in reverse almost, actually. Like, if you're in New Delhi, you're not having 5 kids. You're having 1 or none. The last place in the world that's going to have growth led by birth rates is going to be Africa.
I was just going to say Africa.
But even then, man, the average African country, their birth rate is down to on average of 3 births per mother, which is high, but that's a far cry from the previous 7 to 8 it was just 20, 30 years ago. Which in one sense is a good thing, because eventually everyone's going to starve out if you keep on having more kids, right? But this now means we have to come up with a whole new way of doing things. And I don't think there's anyone at the wheel figuring this out.
No, I don't see anyone that forward thinking, whether that be in the political sphere or the, I don't know. Elon Musk might be an outlier.
Yeah. Have we ever mentioned Elon in boxes as if he was in one? Like, no, he's rather an oddball there. He wants to go to Mars, but half of me thinks that's just because he wants to go home.
He's been asked before if he's from another dimension, on the Joe Rogan podcast, I believe.
Oh yeah. I like Elon there. He's one of the few freaking famous folks like that I like, but he is odd. He's definitely odd.
Yeah, but at least his vision is big, right? It's not just, the way that I see, like, especially North America, I find the vision of the politicians is very limited. It's about 4-year election cycles, not what are we doing for the next 30, 40, 50 sort of years, right?
Yeah. Well, that's any democratic country, though, and it's on purpose, right? It's meant to be like that. And that's one of the few advantages China actually does have. But yeah, democratic countries, that's it. It's one election cycle.
So you see an evolution of capitalism to some sort of, it wouldn't be called an ism anymore. We should make up a new word for this.
Oh, I'm sure they'll figure out one. They'll fit it in there somehow. Though, I don't know, I've been playing with this idea for about 2-3 months, and I'm trying to think about what could possibly replace it. But there's so many moving parts. Like currently, right now, we are having hello. Oh
yeah, yep.
Currently, especially in the States, but everywhere, we're going through a social change, political change, and an economic change, and now a demographic one, all at the same time. I think anyone who says they can tell you what the next 30 years is going to be, they're just trying to sell you something.
They're trying to sell you Bitcoin.
Yeah. You're a Bitcoin guy, right?
Let's say I dabble in cryptocurrency.
I gotcha. I think that's not a bad idea. Dabble it a little bit. Some folks go a little bit far, I think.
I get hit up almost every day in my Instagram account with people trying to sell me Bitcoin, or trying to get me to invest in their mining company.
Like real mining company or digital mining company?
A digital Bitcoin mining. See, and here's the thing, and here's the thing that because this ties into the fiat currency, right? Mm-hmm. So if we do transition to another, as you know, the gold standard was abolished, right?
Yeah, back in 72 under Nixon.
Yes, and that really opened the doors to an inflationary system where the value of money is continually going down. You know, on average, I think it's 3% every 7 years.
That's their target. I'm proud of it.
So, here's the thing. I don't necessarily say that Bitcoin is the future because it relies on computer systems and electricity to run.
Too delicate.
It's not stable enough in order to be universally accepted. I mean, if you don't have electricity or access to the internet or access to the ledger to verify your transactions, it won't work. I know this year I think cryptocurrency will start becoming mainstream, but I don't necessarily see it as being the be-all end-all to solve the current inflationary system.
Yeah. I don't know. Personally, I think you listen to talk, you hear about it, you look at it on the news or whatever, the interwebs, and to me personally, it just sounds like the dot-com bubble all over again if you are familiar with how that went. Like, right. Yes, the internet was a thing of the future, but it got a little overhyped, a little silly back in the 90s.
Like, yeah, well, exactly. I do think having different forms of currency are important, but honestly, what stability would look like in the future is probably tying a currency to a tangible out. I still think abolishing the gold standard was not a great idea.
Yeah, I see why they did it though. If you look into how, like, the reason Americans did it, it all had to do with that Cold War shit going on at the time. Like, I imagine the sane heads in charge there knew that it was economically stupid, but you had to be able to hold and finance that whole alliance system against the Soviets, right?
Right.
You couldn't afford to let it weather on economic principles and ideas. You had to do what you had to do, dude. Yeah, freaking. I could see, like, in the next, like, within our lifetimes, it going back to, like, some kind of commodities. The problem with gold and maybe even silver, especially with how many people there are nowadays, is there might not just be enough of it to finance the whole system there. Like, obviously, the values would go through the roof, but how useful it now is a gold coin that's worth $100,000? Like, you're not going to buy anything with it. You probably don't have one.
Right. No, it's not a practical form of currency in this current system.
Yeah, something that's backed by it though could be.
Right, like maybe Bitcoin backed by gold.
I think that's a thing already. It's one of those cryptos there. I just can't recall the name of it off the top of my head. The guy who founded it, his father was the one who made it legal and who fought to make it legal in the States for you to be able to privately own gold again. I just can't remember the name of it. But yeah, the end of the isms. And, like, I don't know, do you think that's a practical, realistic thing? Or do you think you got a little bit more faith in the current way of doing things?
Well, this is called the Doomer Bloomer podcast for a reason.
Just had to check.
I am optimistically negative, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
I'm with you. I believe if we don't make some hard choices right now, the future is going to look radically different from what we have projected into the 2040s and 2050s.
Yeah. That's the other thing too when it comes to because I think you guys on one of your episodes were talking about Neuralink or that sort of thing, right?
Yeah, we were talking about would, and this ties back into Elon Musk again. Would eventually are we going to get to the point where the human being and the machine will be integrated? Or are we going to live in like Brave New World, a society that's controlled by artificial intelligence?
You mind if I add something to that?
Go right ahead.
If you look at the popular culture's view on any kind of technology that was new going back throughout the last 150 years, whether it was electricity, the combustion engine, planes, people always overestimated at the time the impact they were going to have. Like a lot of people thought that we were going to bring back the dead for when we first started using it, because you put current to a dead body and it jiggles and moves, right?
Right.
Or the car, you had a very steampunk version of the world, or going to the plane. To get what people thought the future were going to be, you just have to watch the Jetsons. A lot of people genuinely thought that's what it was going to be. So when it comes to Neuralink, like, the digital chip age, I think a lot of it's just overshoot. A lot of people just they are overestimating what its practical capacity is, especially with computing slowing down in potency year to year. Like, we're not doubling it every 3 years as it used to be. It's slowing down at a rapid rate now.
Oh, you're saying Moore's law is retracting?
It's done. It is retracting, and it's simply physics. They've got those chips now so small that to make them any smaller, there's not enough atoms of transistor material to actually cause that gate to even work. Like, they can't get them any smaller. You can only make it bigger. Like, the board itself bigger.
Right. So you'd have to move into the area of quantum computing.
Yeah, if we're able to figure that out, and that could be 40 years. Like, AI will be a thing, but like true AI, that's probably a century, if not more off.
Yeah, I would say artificial intelligence is very much in its infancy.
Yeah, like we'll have dumb AI. It's someone that's very good at making up cars, and it can kind of learn what to do with regards to that, but it's not going to contemplate Shakespeare. Like, it's going to be very good at its one little thing. That's it.
Yes, specialized AI.
Yeah, and the Chinese are making great strides in that there, but I got a hunch it'll be the Yanks who come up with the big one. It's just going to take a little longer.
Right. Well, I don't know, man. Elon Musk has his fingers in a lot of different pies.
He does. He is a bit of a positive black swan, isn't he?
He is. I don't know. I follow his career fairly closely. I get updates on his Twitter almost every day. He's quite an eccentric individual.
Yeah. I have a lot of faith in SpaceX. This will be unpopular, but I'm pretty pessimistic on Tesla. Like, I like the idea, but the economics just doesn't make sense. Like, isn't Tesla now currently valued higher than all other North American car companies combined?
Yes, they're around $900 USD a share right now.
And then if I'm correct, doesn't he sell less cars than Chrysler?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, to me, that just doesn't make sense in the long run how that works.
But his vision was always bigger than that. His patents are completely open source, right? So it's going. They're moving. It's not just Tesla that's going to start moving the market. The other car companies now are going to be like, this is something that people want. It's just that Tesla was first to market, which I talked about on my other podcast, the Yukon Gold podcast, last week.
You got a lot of things on the go there, don't you, there, lad?
I have no shortage of work in my schedule, that's for sure.
I see. Yeah, I don't know, like, especially with the innovation, he's definitely, pushed that very far in 10 years. But if you wanted to, Tesla's going to come up with a lot of the technology. It's going to push everything forward, but I don't think retirement portfolio is going to hold that in 20 years, if you know what I mean. If that makes sense.
No, but it is definitely part of a wider, what I see in terms of energy it's part of a wider energy push toward a distributed model for energy.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, we're well aware of this because we live in Northeast BC, and they're building a mega project called the Site C Dam.
Yeah, and that's on top of the natural gas and the oil and the wind turbines and all that stuff. Yeah.
And those are called centralized large generating stations, right? Where you have a centralized grid area where they produce electricity and they transmit it out to
Yeah, for main
your
base load.
right. A lot of this power though is going to be exported. Basically, the whole push behind the Site C Dam is to export power to the western United States. But what I see going forward is a distributed energy model, where eventually, once the costs come low enough, whether that be solar or wind, it'll be a no-brainer not to do it. But like you said, who are we going to sell these things to, right? If there's no next generation to support the pyramid, where's that money coming from?
Yeah, well, North America is an odd one. Like, well, with the exception of us up here in Canada, we're very stereotypical of, like, say, what Europe looks like or Northeast Asia. Like, ours looks almost identical to, say, the German population, right? But if you look at Mexico and the United States, they buck the trend. They're going to be able to pull this off for quite some time compared to almost everybody else. Like, they could keep doing what they're doing for the next almost half century. And because of NAFTA, we're kind of, lumped into them, right? And because we're so small, we can kind of just, tag along for the ride, as it were. But Europe and Northeast Asia, they're going to have to figure out something else. Just because the old export-led model does not work anymore. Like, everyone was always talking about globalization, this and that, but the whole principle behind that is to sell things to somebody else. Well, you got three types of economies. You have your consumption-led economies, your export-led economies, and then you have your Japans, your post-growth economies. And currently Japan's there by themselves, but by the time this pandemic's over, you could probably take a lot of consumption and export-led economies and drop them into that post consumption and production basket there. And that just means we're going to have to figure out how to essentially deal with a society where it's a lot of old people. Like, unless we go full Gestapo here and we start liquidating them, which I don't see that happening anywhere, you got to figure out how to deal with it.
The geriatric pyramid, eh?
Mm-hmm. Like, come on, how do you think... Like, I'm no fan of Trump at all, but how do you think Biden got in?
Right, absolutely.
That's who voted for him, man. All the old people, they got scared of the Rona and they voted for him.
Yeah.
And he kind of talks like them. So.
Well, he is, what, 70-something?
I thought he was 80-something.
I don't know.
I knew Trump was up there, but...
I know, yeah, Trump is like 71.
Yeah, I thought Biden was older than him. Yeah. Definitely an interesting set of events there. What are your views on China there?
What are my views on China? I view China as kind of a wild card that holds all the money.
Money goes in, money never comes out.
Yeah, pretty much.
So what's your kind of thoughts on, like, where do you think China's going to be like in 20 years? Like, do you think it's going to be like steady state, ruling half the world, or do you think it's going to be falling apart at the seams?
China's very isolationist by its nature. I mean, they built a great wall to keep people out.
And that's when people wanted in.
Mm-hmm. It does have access to the ocean. It is making a lot of strides to reduce its carbon. They are going towards a more clean energy economy.
Yeah. Well, you kind of have to if you're responsible for 40% of all the emissions, right?
Yeah. I see there's going to be a power struggle. You already see it with like Huawei, and TikTok and things like that, where they have access to these technology companies, or there are technology companies based in China that are working in North America to establish their own network and their own markets. I see them as a major player, to be honest, but it's going to be a power struggle between them and the United States.
Yeah. I got one little thing to kind of throw in there with regards to China. Like, it's too big of a topic for us to like really get into, but like we were talking about, say, currency before in the American market, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of people are familiar that China made a bid to try to be the new world's currency back in around 2000. What was it, 12, 13? They played around with the idea. And the thing with being a global reserve currency is it's kind of like Highlander. There can be only one. So this was a direct challenge to the United States. Now, in order for you to be the world's reserve currency, whether or not this is a good idea, whether or not gold or silver is a better idea, or Bitcoin, it doesn't matter. With how it works right now, we work off a global reserve currency system. China tried to make a bid to be the next one. Now, for you, in order to do that, you have to be allowed money to freely move in and out of your economy. You can't restrict it.
That's the definition of currency. It has to be able to move.
Well, a lot of countries have currency, but they don't let it leave their borders.
Okay.
Or they don't let other currency in. But if you want to be the global reserve currency, you have to let it flow. Now, China tried this back, a couple years ago. And within just, I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but it was on the tune of just around $250 billion left China within 6 months. That's not a sustainable flow. As soon as they were able to, all those little Chinese businessmen and even the smaller shop owners, they try to get their money out. China caught wind of that after 6 months. They clamped down on it, and they have not opened up their currency market since, and they never will again. So they're like, when it comes to a world reserve currency, they're never going to be the one.
Okay.
They tried it. They didn't like it.
Right. I know. I don't know if did you see this in the news? They were trying. I think it's a hoax, but the headline was that they were trying to build a time machine. Did you see that?
You know what? I would just off the bat say no. Like pre-2019, but like after last year, I'm not like, does it work? No. Did someone try? Well, probably. I don't know.
Yeah, it wouldn't be outside the realm of possibility. Eh?
Yeah, like did someone have too much money kicking around? Like, yeah, possibly, yeah. This was in China?
Yeah.
When do they want to go back to? The last 150 years has been shit.
I don't know. 2010 would be where I want to go, but
this is China making it? Like
that? Yeah. This is the headline that I saw.
If you're China, why would you want to go back in time? This is the best you've had it in centuries. Like, yeah. I thought that thing would be being made in like freaking Alabama or something like that. They want to go back to the good old days.
All right. Where do you want to end this off, Mike?
Oh, where do we want to end this off? Big topic. I would, for your listeners there, because hopefully I'm just all full of shit. I kind of like how things are going for the most part. But over the next 2-3 years, pay attention to how the taxes are possibly going to change regulations, and especially how global trade's working. Like, it's pretty much dying on its feet right now. Like, we're going into this post-growth system. And just to see if if I'm full of shit here, which hopefully I am, just see if you can see signs of it. Because that's what I've been doing the last 3 years, and it's definitely moving in that direction. Like, just see what China's doing. If after this whole Corona thing is done, if they're still trying to, expand out, or whether they're trying to like tuck their wings in and crawl within their borders. That will tell us definitely how this is going to play out.
And the other thing I would say is watch the billionaires.
Yes.
Watch
They're like the sheep in New Zealand.
Right? Like, watch the Bill Gates, watch the Jeff Bezos, the Elon Musks.
What about Soros? I haven't heard anything about Soros in forever.
Right?
He just disappear one day?
Watch the Richard Bransons of the world. I know Bill Gates right now he actually owns the most farmland in the entire continental United States.
Yeah.
Like I said, I think food security is going to be an issue. I think real estate's going to be an issue, and I think energy is going to be a major issue.
That said, North America, probably the best place to be on the planet for the next century.
Mm-hmm. I personally am moving to the Yukon, so.
Oh, you really don't want to deal with this shit, do you?
No, I want to be as far away from large population centers as humanly possible.
Yeah, you're very used to growing potatoes, hunting moose.
Yeah, and
Yukon Golds.
I want to be energy. That's what my other podcast is about. I want to be energy self-sufficient by 2030.
You never thought like the Northwest, like, you know, Kitimat, Prince Rupert, that's pretty empty. The ocean's right there. It's not too cold.
Yeah, it's still too close to Vancouver.
Oh, wow, yeah, you really do want to get out. Right on, man.
So yeah. All right, Mike. Any closing thoughts, and then we'll shut her down.
No, that's just about it there, bud. I think I bored everyone enough.
All right, well, Mike, it was a pleasure having you. This has been season 2 of the Doomer Bloomer podcast with Will Summer, and thanks for joining us. And remember to subscribe, like, and follow on your favorite podcast platform. Cheers.
I forgot to mention that Mike loves goats. This one's for you, Mike.